What a man does for his family should bring him praise and medals. Our society should applaud every husband who stands firm and fulfills his family commitments. Isn't that worthy of attention? It was 4 years after my divorce, and I was sitting in the living room at my parents' house watching a soccer game on TV with the people I loved and hated the most. No, sorry, I didn't quite put it right. I loved some and hated others. There was nothing in between. Thanksgiving is always a big deal for my mom. It ranks as high in her value system as Christmas. In her opinion, we offer our thanks one day and then a month later, we celebrate a magical night receiving our gifts. For the past 4 years, my mom has invited me to both of these holidays, and for 3 years, I refused to come. I told her, I'll only come if Peggy and the asshole aren't there. That's what I called her new husband, Bill. Bill was the one she cheated on me with before she left me. Henry? I wish you wouldn't talk like that, Mom grumbled. I thought I raised you better than that. I'm sorry, Mom, but that's just the way I feel, I countered. If they end up there, I won't be there. Simple as that. Henry, you have to understand, Peggy won't bring the kids if she can't come to us, and she won't come if Bill isn't welcome. Mom, I'm your son, I had to remind her. She's the one who cheated on me, and he's the one she cheated with. So I'm not going to pretend to be nice and sweet. If I have to be in the same room with him, I'll be arrested, and they're both not worth it. I wish you'd change your mind, she insisted. I'm sorry, Mom, but no. Anyway, every year after the divorce, the same thing happened again, with one exception. This year, for the first time, I agreed to come to my parents' house for Thanksgiving. Oh, Henry, I'm so glad you decided to join us this year, exclaimed a clearly pleased Mom. You don't have to bring anything. Everything is taken care of. Just come and enjoy yourself. Your dad is looking forward to meeting you, and what a surprise it will be for the kids. Yeah, I can imagine how surprised they'll be. Just tell Peggy to keep her asshole away from me. I won't go looking for him, but if he catches my eye, I can't promise what will happen then, I warned. Mom looked worried, for Peggy had never been good at doing what she was told. It seemed that everything that came from my wife was a deliberate act of defiance on her part. Back in the days when we first started dating and then married, we took some terrific hikes in the mountains in the western part of the state. I swear if she got too close to a cliff and I yelled, "Be careful!" I think Peggy would have taken a couple more steps forward, just to prove she could do it. And afterward, as she was falling down the mountain, she would have yelled, "You're not my master!" It used to bother me, but I confess that in recent years, picturing it in my imagination has given me a certain pleasure. Despite what my mom told me, I wasn't going to come to the party empty-handed, so I made my now famous cheese ball one filled with minced beef, horseradish, and jalapeno peppers, and bought a big box of crackers to go with it. I love the mix of flavors, but I've rarely been able to enjoy them before because Peggy is lactose intolerant. And the fact that Bill can't tolerate spicy food was just an added bonus for me. My kids have always been like me, and they loved this bright flavor combination, so whenever I made this dish, we would gather around a big plate and giggle and make faces at each other. For Dad, I made sure to make a Cobb salad with lots of tomatoes, blue cheese, and bacon, just like we both like, and we could snack on it before the main course was served. Yes, my dad and I are big fans of bacon and moldy cheese, and that can't be considered a crime in any way. If I was going to go, I intended to spend my time with the people who were important to me and ignore the others. In preparation for the visit, I put on my most fashionable casual clothes, looked myself over in the mirror, satisfied, and then went to my parents' house. There's nothing wrong with looking stylish, but also kind of careless, like, oh, it's just an old-fashioned outfit, right? The only rule is a man can look classy, but not say it out loud. I knew Bill would probably put on a dapper suit, put on his fancy gold watch, and add some more bling. But I also knew he was about a dozen pounds overweight now, while I'd been a regular at the gym since my divorce. For that matter, I was also aware that Peggy had put on a few pounds over the past 4 years. However, thinking about all the bling brought me back to the day Peggy left me. She was sitting in the living room in her best business suit, and her packed suitcase was already at the ready by the door. The room looked surprisingly empty when I realized that all the knickknacks she had bought relentlessly throughout our marriage, including porcelain figurines, first editions of books she had never read, and cups and saucers we were never allowed to use, were all gone, along with the ugly bookcase and the over-decorated, gaudy sideboard that contained all that junk. I had to listen to Peggy wail when I bought a new fishing reel for $40, but she herself easily spent $2,000 on a first edition of a book she'd never even read. And heaven help me if I ever questioned the wisdom of her purchase. "What's going on, Peggy?" I asked her a question. "I'm so sorry, Henry. It's so hard to say." "Yeah, well, I'm leaving you," she said. It's funny what a man can think of at a time like this. Well, speaking of me, I wasn't broken. To tell you the truth, inwardly, I even welcomed the decision. The only thing that bothered me at that moment was our children. "Where are the children?" I asked immediately. They had already moved into their new home. "Don't worry," she made a soothing gesture. "You'll still be able to see them whenever you want." This later turned out to be a lie when the fairest court in the world ruled that I deserved what is now called liberal visitation rights. "What's his name?" I asked bluntly. "What do you mean, Henry?" She tried to dodge the question by pretending she didn't understand me. "Come on, there's no point in lying, Peggy. You wouldn't have left me if you didn't already have someone in mind, and I'm about to find out who's become your backup airfield anyway. So, what is it? What's his name?" "Bill Jensen." She said it very quietly, as if she was embarrassed after all. "So that's your boss? You're sleeping with your boss? What a cliché," I snorted. "He's a good man and he can provide for the children in a way that you never can." She rushed to her lover's defense. "It's better for them, and for me, too. In time, you'll realize that. Maybe it will be good for you, too. I'm not asking for any money because Bill makes more money than you do, so you'll have enough to spend. It's a good decision for everybody, Henry." "You'll see," Peggy reasoned, trying to assure me, though I suppose she was trying to assure herself that she was doing the right thing. They say that time heals all wounds, but it's not true. The wound is still there, it just hurts less with time. Yes, I miss the girl I once married, but not the wife who left me in almost cold blood. What I truly missed was coming home and spending time with my wonderful children every night. I still went to their sports games and amateur performances, spent every weekend and some weekdays and half of the holidays with them, but none of it was the same. It's impossible to squeeze an entire life into a weekend and half of the holidays, but at least I tried my best. Anyway, I learned to make the most of it, and now, 4 years after my divorce, I've started to move on little by little. I adjusted to the new normal, valued time with my kids at a gold weight, worked more than hard in between their visits, and finally hit the gym to burn my anger and sexual frustration into a hail of sweat and getting my body in shape. And then, 30 long months after my divorce was finalized, I met Bridget. She was 3 years younger than me, had a daughter, a dog, a mortgage, and an ex-husband who cheated on her. And this woman also had a radiant smile with a 1,000-watt smile that lit up the whole room. It was Bridget who convinced me that I spend too much time, energy, and mental strength avoiding unpleasant situations, which then causes me to miss out on the people I love. As she said, "I'm just wasting myself and my emotions when I should be using my power to my own advantage." I don't know how or where she learned this philosophy, but to me she is a loving woman, patient and wise beyond her years, and I fell hopelessly in love with her. Fell so much in love that I secretly bought a ring from Bridget and had big plans for the second week after that Thanksgiving. But that's another story. I pulled up to my parents' house, walked through the front door, and was immediately greeted by screams and stamping feet. Just a few moments later, my kids pounced on me, and my parents, with smiles on their faces, followed them leisurely in my direction. It was the moment I had missed for too many years. Almost everyone I cared about was now in my arms, and I felt like I was in seventh heaven. To be honest, I was so stunned that I almost dropped the goodies I had prepared, but my mom was just in time, taking the bag from my hands and kissing me on the cheek and heading back to the kitchen. My kids were full of energy and enthusiasm for their age, the age when most other kids are starting to get frustrated with their parents, and that alone couldn't make me happier. As we all headed to the back of the house, Dad whispered conspiratorially, "They're already here. Are you ready for this?" I just nodded with a resigned look and walked into the lion's den. "Henry, I'm so happy to see you finally come to one of the family events." Peggy smiled with all the fake warmth and insincerity of a lying, cheating bitch, and I mentally noted that she was a member of our family only, insofar as she had borne and then birthed the two children my mother and father adored. I couldn't help myself. "It's good to see you, Peggy. Life seems to have been good to you," I said, glancing at my ex-wife. She knew well that my phrase meant, "You've put on a lot of weight," and her sudden joy had faded. 1. 0 in my favor. And then Mr. Mudila came up to me with his hand outstretched. "Henry, good to see you. How are all those wires and circuits doing?" He knew I was an electrical engineer with a master's degree, which he didn't think was too highly regarded compared to a corporate manager. And this greeting of his sounded dismissive enough to pass the husband's in-laws admissibility test. Or at least that's what he thought. I turned to my father, just in time to catch the annoyed expression on his face, before smirking at our inside joke. The asshole had forgotten that my father was actually a chemical engineer himself. I turned and headed for the kitchen, proclaiming as I went, "Dad, I made that Cobb salad you like. Can I get you something to drink? How about you, Mood?" Bill? "Thank you. I'm fine," he grumbled unhappily. Nah, it was more like he wasn't okay at all. "Say, Dad, how are things going in the field of medical engineering these days? How close are you to mass-producing a new vaccine?" Okay, you can call me an asshole, but I was really enjoying the situation. Dad's understanding smile was telling me, "Message received." I made 2 bourbons before Dad joined me in the kitchen, appearing there following the kids, who were only a couple steps ahead of him. Joy turned 13, and I suppose it's obvious that the newborn girl's name was given in happier times. She grows and blossoms and develops into an amazing young girl, characterized by wisdom beyond her years and amazing fearlessness. Greg is still 11, and his main problem is that, like many of his peers, he is scared of almost nothing, but as a rule, boys his age lack common sense. Here's an example of what I mean. A few months ago, the 3 of us were hiking in the Sangre de Cristo 2 mountains near Santa Fe, and Joy accidentally came across a rattlesnake. I had already discussed this possible danger with my kids, and my daughter knew what to do, but she acted so poised and composed that for a moment, I didn't even realize why Joy had stopped in the middle of the trail. She slowly stepped back, pointing at the snake, and we took a detour to avoid any confrontation with the venomous rattler. I was so proud of my sensible daughter. And then Greg picked up a rock and threw it at the snake. Now do you see what I mean? Anyway, I handed Daddy his bourbon while the kids set about unpacking my cheese ball in 4 hands. "Oh, cool! Jalapenos!" Joy has never been shy about expressing her emotions. It's so tangy and creamy at the same time. Greg was already opening the box of crackers. "Dad, did you add horseradish?" he asked me dutifully. "Don't I always do that?" "Awesome, Dad." We high-fived each other. "Delicious." I glanced furtively at Peggy, and her face seemed to crinkle as if she was thoroughly disgusted by the whole thing. The scoreboard went up in my favor very quickly. Pretty soon the day turned into a regular holiday ritual. Parade and soccer broadcasts on TV, bourbon and an abundance of snacks inside the house and in the backyard. A man needs to keep his cool if he really wants to go all the way from turkey and stuffing pies all the way to dessert itself. Bill tried again to engage his father-in-law in conversation, and Dad nodded and acquiesced to him importantly, So I took the opportunity to go out on the back patio and find a comfortable chair where I could sit quietly and enjoy that nice fall air. I heard one half of the double door behind me squeak as it slid open. "Are you going to talk to me? Or are you just going to ignore me all day?" came a familiar and slightly annoyed voice. As I suspected, it was Peggy. "I'm not ignoring you, I just don't have much to say to you," I said neutrally. "Henry, when are you going to come to your senses? It's been 4 years," I said mentally. "In about 4 hours." But she didn't need to know that. In fact, I'd rather she didn't. "I'm done with you, Peggy. What you did to me was a mean, disgusting betrayal. But I handled it and overcame my anger." That's what I actually replied to my ex-wife. "You got over it, really?" Her voice was full of disbelief. "Henry Stevens, if I didn't know you better, I'd say you were seeing a therapist. Have you become such a modern man, Henry?" Peggy's voice was clearly sarcastic now. If she could have named me one real accomplishment in her own life, other than pushing 2 wonderful children out of her screaming, I might have responded politely to such an arrogant remark. But I couldn't remember. But I still couldn't remember any of her successes. Peggy sank into a neighboring chair on the other side of the table that separated us and asked, "I mean it, Henry, how are you doing? The kids say you're doing well, but they won't share the details with me." For the first time during our conversation, I turned and looked in her direction. In the bright sunlight of the day, and perhaps for the first time in my life, I saw that my ex-wife looked older than her years. There was too much makeup on Peggy's face, and even that didn't hide the sadness in her eyes. To my surprise, I felt for a moment sorry for this woman who had so quickly and efficiently destroyed me only 4 years ago. "I'm fine," I confirmed what our children had told her. She hesitated for a few moments, but then asked, "I heard there's a new woman in your life. Yeah, I'm happy for you." She didn't look happy at all, much less happy. I nodded, accepting her words, but not even trying to hold back an involuntary smile. Truth be told, I'd been unspeakably happy as of late, and while I had no desire to socialize with either her or Bill, I realized that they no longer had any power over me, and that was one hell of a good feeling. Peggy spent some time talking about the kids. Nothing that I didn't already know, since they kept me informed of everything that was going on in their lives. One of the things they told me that Peggy might not have been aware of was an implicit confession of their rather cool attitude toward their stepfather. But on the other hand, the children never spoke ill of him in front of me, and I respected them for that. It was usually just a characteristic grimace or upturned nose at the mention of him. But that was enough for me to know what they were talking about. I must confess that for the first few years, I occasionally had the local private detective bureau keep an eye on him. Well, you know that old saying about once cheated on, etc. They never found anything, though, and from the reports I've seen, this Bill was trying to be a good husband and stepfather, so I'd give him a plus for that. Although not cheating on his wife isn't something that deserves a medal or a Medal of Honor. Joy followed me out of the house and froze for a moment when she saw her mother and I talking like civilized adults. "Shut your mouth, young lady. The end of the world is off. Your mother and I are just talking," I teased her, and that gave me the smile I wanted to see. "Grandpa said he's doing the salad thing. How about you? Do you want some?" Joy asked. "Tell your grandpa that if only he eats all that salad, I'll drink all his bourbon," I parried. With a giggle, she left, and a couple minutes later brought me a plate of salad and iced tea. "Grandma told me to tell you not to drink too much bourbon if you don't want to sleep on the couch tonight." Joy laughed, finding it very funny. "Tell your grandmother," I said with a grin, "that her couch is too short for me." Giggling, Joy scurried back into the house. She obviously enjoyed playing the role of messenger. "I've never understood how you can eat that stuff, and I never will," the ex-wife commented in disgust as she watched me appetite for a plate of salad. Peggy was never really happy unless she had something to be angry about. Well, right now she was referring to blue cheese with mold. I was reminded of an old friend of mine who passed away last year. He used to use an expression that always made me laugh, so I quoted it to Peggy. "As they say, don't judge until you taste it," I said grandly, and then grinning added, "And anyway, there's no such thing as taste and color." "Boo!" Peggy pantomimed nausea and went into the house, and I was left to enjoy the salad without her. Not a minute after she disappeared, my father joined me on the back porch with his own portion of salad. "What did you say to Peggy? She rushed past and she looked like she'd just sucked a lemon." Dad smiled as he set his plate on the table and said it. I feigned a second thoughtfulness and then replied, "Well, all I did was tell her I was happy. I guess I disappointed her with that." Dad grinned and we began to savor the wonderful Cobb salad. "What are you drinking?" Dad asked. "Iced tea. Mom told me to slow down on the bourbon," I complained. That elicited another chuckle from Dad, and then he nudged his bourbon in my direction. "Your mom is worried you'll get drunk because Peggy and Bill are here." I took just one sip and handed the glass back to my father. "Mom is unnecessarily worried. I really think this old story is done with. Closed and boarded up." I tapped my palm lightly on the table. "I noticed that." Dad nodded with approval in his eyes and changed the subject. "Is anyone else coming over for dessert?" I just nodded with a conspiratorial look and smiled. Dad grinned into his gray mustache, too. "Do they know what they're getting into?" He clarified just in case. "Yes, and I think she's looking forward to it," I said. Now we were both smiling. Dad and I had never lacked for companionship, and we knew enough about each other's engineering backgrounds to be able to talk freely about our work. Even though he was under very strict NDA restrictions, I could read between the lines, and as long as my competitors couldn't find out anything specific about my work, I was safe. Soon we finished our portions of salad almost simultaneously, and, satisfied with our food and conversation, went back inside. Dad resumed his conversations with Peggy and Bill, and I went with the plates to the kitchen to help Mom. She had trained me in kitchen duties years ago, and all I usually had to do was follow a few of her brief instructions. Now Mom was busy teaching her grandchildren similar to mine, and I set about helping them. Joy set the casseroles and still empty plates on the table, while Greg made mashed potatoes, though he preferred to call it mashing potatoes, and both took turns spreading cream cheese mixture on crackers. Every time one of them didn't hold back and had a treat, they'd come back offering 3 more finished crackers for us. I've mentioned before that I'm proud of my kids, haven't I? By the way, Peggy didn't lift a finger to offer her help, although she did bring a pumpkin pie that looked quite good. Of course, I always preferred Mom's wonderful apple pie, but that's an understandable and forgivable sonly weakness. Soon, the main meal was ready, and Mom called us all to the table. Joy was a couple steps ahead of me, reserving a chair between herself and Mom just across from Peggy and Mudak, who had taken seats on the other side of the table. When I saw this, I thought that dinner seemed to be getting better by the minute. In fact, the whole meal was very enjoyable. I even pretended to listen to Peggy and Bill, but in reality I wasn't looking at them, but at Dad to engage him in conversation, and Mom's cooking itself was, as usual, excellent, something she always absolutely deserved to be known for. Dinner was coming to an end when Bill rubbed his hands together and proclaimed, "Mom, that was great, but now I'm ready for Peggy's pumpkin pie." I cringed when he called my mom, Mom, but remained silent. Judging by her less than enthusiastic reaction, I don't think she liked it much either. She turned to me and asked, "Henry, when are our other guests arriving?" I was just about to answer, "Any minute now, I think," when the doorbell rang. Joy and Greg jumped up as if on springs and shouted, "I'll get it! No, I'll get it!" raced to the front door. We heard cheers and low shrieks from the corridor as they both began to embrace the new visitors. I myself arrived just in time to receive a warm kiss from Bridget and a big hug from little Clara, just after I'd managed to pry her away from Joy and Greg. In the time that had passed since they'd met, My kids had welcomed Clara into their tight-knit circle like the little sister they'd never had, and the three of them had quickly become inseparable. And as I said earlier, I planned to settle the matter more formally in the very near future. We ushered both guests into the dining room, and before I could introduce them, Mother rose from her seat with open arms and exclaimed, "Bridget, I was afraid you weren't coming." They hugged, and then Mom asked with exaggerated hope, "Klarochka, can I get a hug?" Well, of course, the little girl gladly did. The three of them had already bonded recently, just like the three kids, and Mom and Dad were aware of my plans. The only ones left out of the loop were Peggy and Bill, and they were staring tensely and stiffly, their mouths almost hanging open at this merry commotion. I immediately set about solving the problem. "Peggy and Bill," I announced, "this red-haired goddess is Bridget Meehan, and that little rascal over there is Clara. She looks like an angel, but she's actually a real devil." Clara giggled at the notion and immediately turned up her nose, reveling in her dangerous fame. "Bridget," I continued, "this is my ex-wife Peggy and her new husband Bill." "Oh yes, I've heard a lot about you. I'm glad we finally met," my red-headed goddess chirped with a smile. There was too much implied in that simple statement, and Dad couldn't contain his smile when he realized the hidden essence of such a verbal message. Greg had already dragged a chair over so Clara could sit down with them when Mom intervened. "Henry, don't just stand there. Come on, get Bridget a chair. Come here, baby. Sit close to me." With those words, she moved her own chair to the corner of her side of the table, making room for Bridget to sit beside her. This castling didn't escape my ex's notice either. "Is this something we should know about?" my mom asked, looking at the bag Bridget had brought with her. "Oh yes, I'm sorry I forgot," she said. "I have here. I made some pumpkin praline bars. I hope you like them," Bridget added, blushing slightly, embarrassed. It might have seemed like a mere coincidence that she'd managed to combine two of Daddy's favorite ingredients, pumpkin and pecans, and cover them deliciously with brown sugar and frosting, but she'd been well instructed beforehand, so she knew exactly what she was doing. Dad was quite diplomatic, graciously eating a slice of Peggy's pumpkin pie and 2 pumpkin praline bars from Bridget, before loudly dropping his fork on his plate and patting himself on the stomach and declaring, "No, that's it! I can't eat another bite!" Despite this, or even thanks to the surrendered Dad, the 3 children managed the rest of the goodies just fine without him. With Bridget's arrival, the direction of the conversation changed. Both Mom and Dad turned their attention to her and Clara. Just as it had been with Joy, I soon noticed that Daddy liked to draw little girls into conversations, and little girls were very fond of talking about themselves in a big way. Thus, they were a perfect match for each other. Now the old sly man had masterfully captured the attention of Clara and Joy, discussing something with them in their close circle, while Bridget was quietly telling her mother about the recent events that seemed to interest her so much. Poor Peggy and Bill seemed to be almost completely neglected. Well, I was more than happy to just watch, listen, and smile as I watched my new girls being drawn deeper and deeper into the life of our family. So, quite peacefully, the evening went on for a while longer until Peggy decided to clear the table and Greg got up to help his mother. No one specifically asked him to. He just did it naturally. Yes, my boy was growing up fast. Shortly after that, we moved into the living room, and that's when I noticed that Bridget and Peggy were missing. I went in search of them and found both ladies in Daddy's study, talking quietly, so I prudently decided to leave them alone. I still don't know what they were talking about, and I never asked, except to ask Bridget later. "Is everything all right?" "Sure, why wouldn't it be?" She smiled, white-toothed, but not so much that she knew why I'd asked my question, as that she was enjoying this family evening. "Well, I saw that you were engrossed in your conversation with Peggy, and I just wondered if everything was okay." I explained some of my concern. The question elicited a quiet giggle from her. "I'm fine. I'm not sure about Peggy, though. I got the impression that she might be experiencing buyer's regret syndrome. Hearing that, I just smiled, shook my head, and said, "Not my problem. I think it was that Thanksgiving that I finally felt healed." I had been on the right path before, but it was that night when I came face to face with my ex, and my scarred heart remained unscathed, and then saw my future nestled so well in the family that had raised me, that I finally realized that the past was behind me, and only good things lay ahead. 2 weeks later, I got down on one knee and asked Bridget to marry me, and she responded with an enthusiastic "yes," and then threw me to the ground with her whole body pressed against me. And another 8 months after that day, we were married, officially uniting our blended family into one. I still had a lot more to learn about marriage and family. For example, I learned that Clara's father was a bad husband to Bridget, but a good father, and I tried to support his role in the girl's life. He, in turn, also learned to trust me, and this made Clara's life richer and easier. I also learned that although Peggy was a bad wife to me, and Bill was no better than she was, yet they both took their parenting responsibilities seriously. In time, I learned to support their efforts for Joy and Greg, and forgave their past sins so that I could live in the present without the heavy weight of bitterness and anger that had poisoned my life for too many years. Much credit for this goes to Bridget. The years that followed were full of various surprises, most of which were happy and some of which made us struggle with problems and difficulties. But we always fought them together, shoulder to shoulder. A year after we were married, Bridget came to me with tears in her eyes and a look of confusion on her face. "Henry, I'm so sorry. I don't understand. I don't know how it happened," she whispered in a broken voice. "What happened, my love?" I was alarmed. "Whatever it is, we can fix it." "I'm afraid it can't be fixed, darling. It is what it already is." "Yeah, I think I'm pregnant," my wife said in a lost voice. I suppose you've heard the expression, "pregnant pause for?" I had never really understood it until that moment. For a while, I fell out of the world around me, as if my consciousness, having soared, left the bodily shell and time accelerated its run 1,000 times. My mind was busy with the rambling calculations of how old I would be when my unborn child finished high school. I was thinking about our future investments and college tuition for Joy, Greg, and Clara, wondering if we should start another college fund for our future baby girl. Or baby. I was simultaneously trying to figure out if we should put off getting the new car Bridget and I were planning to buy, figuring out if we could cheapen our vacation without disappointing the kids, and realizing that a one-bedroom house would be too small. "Henry? Henry, are you okay? Say something!" Bridget's concerned voice broke through my hazy mind. It awakened me from my feverish and conflicting thoughts. I looked at my pea-bellied princess, wiped the tears from her beautiful eyes, and said, "I think this is just wonderful. Clara is going to have a little brother or sister. Imagine how jealous she'll be." I think it worked. After that, we just stood there crying and hugging and laughing and kissing until we recovered enough to just sit on the couch and hug each other tight and tight. We decided to keep the news of our future addition a secret for a while and not tell the children until we had moved on and Bridget's new position had revealed itself. That's how, in each other's arms, they found us coming home for dinner. By the way, if you're still wondering, that night we ordered delivery of our favorite goodies and threw a coup party.